Hello, everybody. Dave Matthews from Spark of Life. This is our podcast number 5, When Give Up Lurks. Have you ever, when you experience loss, and have you ever felt like just quitting? Have you ever felt hopeless and that you just don't know what to do? You're so overwhelmed with the loss of the dearest on earth to you, maybe, and you just feel like giving up? How many of you have felt like giving up? Boy, I felt like giving up 100 times in this messy business of grief recovery. Well, I'm David Matthews with Spark of Life, where our heartbeat is to walk beside those who are experiencing devastating loss, and we do that in a number of ways. And happy to have you on this podcast. With me this morning today is Rusty Meadows. Rusty has been our partners at Spark of Life since almost the very beginning, and welcome, Rusty. And just give very briefly your association with Spark of Life, how it started, just briefly. And
Well, thanks, David. Glad to be on. Appreciate you asking me to join you. Nancy, my wife, and I have been a part of Spark of Life since 2010, so 10 years now. When we went to one of the very first retreats, and our loss at that time that we attended the retreat for was, at the time, I didn't really think it was that big a deal. I mean, it was a big deal to us, but I had a misunderstanding of grief, and we had lost our son in terms of how we knew our son before to drug addiction, although he was still living. And the retreat just meant so much to us, and we learned so much about loss and the different kinds of losses. After that, we told Dave and Debbie, if you ever like for us to help, we'd love to do it. And so it wasn't long after that they invited us to join with them and to work with them. And so we've done that, and so we've done many retreats ourselves. And in fact, in August, I did retreat number 49 for me.
wow.
So next one will be 50. But in 2015, actually, we were at a Spark of Life retreat. We lost our son to death. He died from complications of his drug use. So anyway, having had experience with grievers, having had experience with Spark of Life, even though that loss was and still is and always will be devastating, what we've learned through Spark of Life has helped us more than I can ever be able to describe.
Well, and you and Nancy have been such a blessing to Spark. 49 retreats that they have led out of our 107. Just think of that. And those retreats, by the way, are 3-day, 3.5-day retreats. We are starting virtual retreats shortly also, so we can do both. But Rusty, you mentioned, Justin was struggling with drug addiction, and so you lost him, but he was still alive. And then, of course, he died in 2015. And this podcast is number 4 in a series of CPR of grief recovery, and the C is context. And it just very briefly, the context of the loss is very important in how you handle the loss, right? It's more than just the one event. It is a series of events. It's the context of your life.
It really is. And, one of the things we do when people come to retreats and we take them through our steps is do a loss history. And we talk about how that all loss happens in the context of other losses. And so, for me to understand that, there could be a loss many years ago. I share at retreats how that when I was 12, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and then she died when she was 20. We as a family handled that loss not very well at all. We didn't know how to grieve. But you take that, you go all the way back to when I was, a youngster or an adolescent, and what I learned about, well, I didn't really learn anything until later on when I realized how badly we handled that. But that context of that loss, for example, carries forward into how I handled everything else in my life that was considered a loss.
Yeah. Including non-death losses, right?
Oh, definitely including non-death
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big things I learned going through this, the training in grief recovery that you and I have, and our families have been through. I mean, you and Nancy and Debbie and I and others that work with Spark, and the training about non-death losses can devastate you, and it can be connected to how you handle maybe the biggest loss of your life. And you described that with Justin. And did you ever, and Nancy, ever feel hopeless after Justin during his addiction years while he was alive, and then during obviously after his death? You ever feel hopeless?
Yeah, well, for yes and no.
I
I'm
get
sure
that. I get that. Yeah.
I'm sure I did. Although um, I guess maybe I just don't want to admit it. You know, to me, I want to think there's always hope. I felt very helpless, very helpless.
Maybe
I don't know if
helpless is the right word, right?
I don't
Yeah.
know if I ever really felt hopeless, but I know that there are at times, and those that do feel hopeless.
Yeah.
And hopeless, when we use the analogy of the pit of grief, there I can be in the bottom of that pit, and without understanding grief, without having the proper tools, the longer I stay in the bottom of that pit, I may really begin to feel hopeless. There's no way out of here,
Right. Right.
and that's a tough place to be.
It is. And then, in our second podcast of this series on the CPR of grief recovery is permission to both grieve and permission to recover. Defining recovery, and we've talked about this, recovery is not everything's great all of a sudden, and recovery is not I'm never sad again, but recovery is living forward with hope and with purpose and meaning, and that life can be full of purpose and meaning again, and even full of joy again. And so permission to go ahead and grieve. And then today we're really focusing on the R of CPR, which is restarting and reframing. And when I call it like this, when give up lurks, and I say, what can I do? I've tried everything I can think of to get out of this pit of grief, and I still feel terrible. I just feel like helpless. What do I do next? And we want to talk this morning a little bit, or today, about the power of restarting. And we've said often that recovery is a messy business. It's not linear. It's not five neat little steps to getting out of the pit of grief and all of a sudden life is full of sunshine and rainbows again, right? I have to constantly restart. Talk about that. When on this journey out of the pit of grief, which we would call a healthy recovery, I'm up here and I feel really good one day, and maybe I have a good week, and then all of a sudden I wake up and everything is negative and everything is dark, and I say, what has happened to me? Talk about this journey like that, the up and downs of grief recovery.
That is, I see that all the time, not only at retreats and after retreats when we hear from people, but even in my private practice as a therapist. There are ups and downs, and one of the things that we try to emphasize to folks is expect the ups and downs. It's not going to always be just a straight, smooth, level road. Even though it's an incline going up out of the pit, there are going to be those ups and downs, and when those downs occur, I think if we expect that's just a part of recovery, then if we're not blindsided by those, then it's easier to deal with them. And you actually touched on something that I was going to say. At Spark of Life, we want to convey the message that there is hope, and it's possible to have hope, even though life will never be the same. Life will never be the same. It won't be the same. It can't be the same after a devastating loss. but the hope can be there. The hope is there. I think one of the things about reframing or restarting, as you said, is to believe. You know, a lot of times, and I've kind of had a personal, not a change, but maybe I've rethought some things, rethought some things, you know, in my own recovery about, you know, I've said to myself, if I can just change my thinking, which is a cognitive exercise, that is important, and we definitely need to change our thinking about grief, and maybe we'll talk about that again later on with the brain box. But I also have to believe. I've got to believe that I can be better. If I don't believe that I can be better, if I don't believe that things can be better in my life, then it doesn't matter what I think. And
Oh, true. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it really is true about believing, and it really does fit into this restarting thing. And it's almost like I have to restart every day because every day is different. And I used the illustration earlier in a podcast when we were kind of summarizing these 3 points of CPR, context, permission, and restarting, reframing, is that, you know, my New Year's resolution every year is to read the Bible every day. And I have never made it. I've never made it. And usually I blow it by day 7, you know, by January 7th. I say, oh my, I didn't read my Bible today. And what would happen if I give up because I blew it on a day? What might happen is I never read the Bible again, right? So I got to get up on January 9th and restart again. Or if I go a week without reading, all right, I didn't hit my goal, but I have to restart. I have to do that with exercise, eating right, every other aspect of life. This restarting thing can actually, you know, I have to believe I can get there. Yeah, the illustration of the guy in jail, right?
Mm.
And that we use at the retreat and in our work is that this guy or this woman is in jail and they're holding on the bars, and all they have to do is let go of the bars and walk out. But and we always get great discussion in that illustration, like, why doesn't this person let go of the bars? He doesn't think he can do it. I can't get out of jail. And if you think you can't do it, if you believe, if you don't have the belief that you can live life fully again, even though it's different and it'll always be different, then I will give up. So when give up lurks, I have to have the belief. And to me, I have to break it down to a 1-day deal, right? And I know you've done a lot of drug addiction, substance abuse counseling. By the way, Rusty is a licensed professional therapist. He's a licensed counselor, therapist. I don't know what all your credentials are, but I know you're licensed, right? And he's good. And it's really important to get up in the morning. And as I say, okay, we're going to restart. I might have a bad day, but I need to get up and break this thing down to where I get up and do the one thing I need to do. We all often say do the next right thing, but believing has to be the core of that. And this restarting, if I think I have to, we talk about the domino day and we talk about trying to get from the pit of grief to the top of the pit in one day, and that's impossible. And everybody knows that's impossible. But you know what I can do today? I can give myself permission to have a really bad day. And then I can also give myself permission, okay, to get up and wash my face again and to start again. And that's real powerful. Talk about the concept of anchors to sails, if you will, that we do at our retreat. What does that mean? Anchors to sails.
Anchors to sails is a great concept that, you know, it means I've got to do something, you know. I really do have to do something in order to recover. It doesn't matter what the recovery is from. You know, I've got a good friend that her brother, unfortunately, had the COVID virus, and he was in very, very, very critical condition. But he has survived it, and he is still in a recovery mode, a recovery process. And whether it be from the virus or from some other type physical injury, recovery is something that requires action. Recovery requires action. If I'm having to learn to walk again or regain strength to walk again, they're going to have the PT people in there. They're going to be getting me up, and I may take just 3 steps the first day. I may just be able to sit up. And is that progress? Yes, that's progress. The next day I may stand up. The next day I may take a step. The next day I may take 10 steps. But it's a progressive thing. But I've got to start somewhere, and I've got to be willing to take the action. Now, in anchors to sales, the idea of pulling up the anchor, and with this analogy, in this situation, we're talking about, let's pull up that anchor, which is holding us back. It's keeping us stuck in our grief, and let's set sail. Let's start moving. Let's do something, and that might be as simple. We ask people that come to retreats and people that do our online course, just name one thing, and I do it with people in therapy. What's one thing you can do that you haven't been able to do, that you can do that will indicate that you're taking a step forward, getting out of this pit of grief? What's just one simple thing you can do? It could be some of the things people have said. It could be getting up before noon during the day. I'm going to get up before noon. Okay, starting Monday, I'm going to get up before noon. It's like goal setting. You set it, you write it down. You have a target date. By this date, I'm going to do this. It might mean I'm going to begin to go through some things and sort out things of the loved one that I've lost to death. They're gone. What am I going to? I've been just leaving the room, or haven't gone through their clothes. Those kinds of things.
What would happen,
it's
Rusty?
naming something and being prepared to do it. Even get some. Pardon?
Oh, I was going to say, what would happen if can you hear me now? Do we have?
Yes.
Okay. What would happen, Rusty, if you waited until you felt like doing it? What might happen if
I waited until I felt like doing it? If I waited until I felt like doing it, it would probably be like me with exercise. I would never do it.
You would never do it. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's such a powerful thing. And we say often in our work that recovery is a decision I make, not an emotion I feel. I can't wait for the emotion. If I make all my decisions based upon how I feel at the moment, I might not ever do anything. I might not ever go back to work again. If I wait till I feel like it. And in recovery, that's so important. And that goes back to the one thing component of restarting with one thing, not with a bunch of things, and not with, I'm going to do 5 things by next Tuesday. But what's the one thing I have to do that will propel me in my recovery that I can do? And I might need to share that with somebody, and I might need to set a deadline date for it, like going through my child's things. We hear that often at retreats. They need to do that. They might have not done it for a year. We've had some that haven't done it for 3 years. They haven't even gone into their child's room, for example, or they haven't gone through their husband's or their wife's things if they lost a spouse, but they need to do it. And so when they say, okay, I need to do this one thing, and here I'm going to do it by the end of the year, and then tell somebody about it. We continually have people contact us at Spark of Life. They send emails. Occasionally they call Debbie or me, and they say, I have done my anchors to sales. I've done the one thing I needed to do, which propels them to do the next right thing. And we hear this all the time from our participants: do the next right thing, do the next right thing. It gets kind of old to say that over and over, but it becomes an expression or kind of an axiom. It's so true because it is true.
Right.
I can only do the next right thing. And that's restarting. Yeah, go ahead.
And let me share a very personal example of something that happened with Nancy and me after the last retreat in August. Uh, we were doing anchors for sales on Sunday, and Nancy said, "I've got one," and I had no idea she was going to say this. And when Justin died in January of 2015, after he died, we kept some of his shirts, and we sent them off to someone who was going to make some pillows for us. Well, something happened in her life. She was unable to do it. I don't think she ever took the shirts out of the box. She mailed that box back to us. Now, this was probably 8 or 9 months after we sent them to her. So let's just say it's late 2015. We put that box in a corner in a bedroom in our house, and that box had been sitting there. We had never opened that box 5 years later.
Wow.
And so when we were at the retreat in August, Nancy told everybody there about the box. And she says, when we get home, that would be Sunday night. She said, Monday, which would be the next day, she said, we're going to open that box and take those shirts out. And so I came in Monday evening, and she said, let's go get the box. And when we did, and we opened it, and I think just the fact that we shared that with that group, and that we said, it was a form of accountability,
Right.
And we said, and we spoke it. We said, this is what we're going to do, and this is when we're going to do it. We did that, and that was something that we had been putting off for 5 years. But just the fact that we said we're going to do it, and we did it. I mean, that's a step.
And that's how you recover. The Grief Recovery Institute, the Grief Recovery Handbook by John James and Russell Friedman, we quote this all the time. Recovery from loss is achieved by a series of small and correct steps made by the one who is grieving. I have got to break it down to small steps, and correct steps.
And somebody might hear that story and say, 5 years, and you say you're in a healthy recovery?
Exactly.
Well, yes, we are in a healthy recovery, but it's just something that we just put it off because, it obviously didn't have priority for us. Yeah. But it didn't mean we weren't in a healthy recovery because we hadn't done that.
Yeah, and it leads to our kind of final point today about reframing. And you have to reframe your emotions. There's many different aspects of reframing that many therapists use, and I've used it in the coaching I do and my pastoral counseling I've done. But reframing is a powerful tool, and what I need to reframe negative emotions and bad days. That's what we mean by the CPR. Context, permission, and restarting, and then reframing kind of puts the cap. It revives our heart. It gives us hope. We've got to make it practical and yes, in a sense, simple, but it's not simple going through those boxes of shirts. It could be profoundly emotional. And you could even in the midst of doing the one thing, going through the shirts, you could go down emotionally and feel, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. And to reframe those emotions is not a negative thing, even though they might be negative emotions. They're positive in my getting out of that pit of grief with my pain. You never get to the point where you don't feel the pain, but it's not so intense that it destroys other relationships, and dominates my life. Right. And so this reframing is so vital when I dip down to reframe it. Said, this is part of a healthy recovery. What a great illustration you just used. One more thing, Rusty, and then we got to go. But on our next podcast, I hope you do it with me, we're going to be talking about the brain box. And yes, we got to reframe and rethink some things that maybe we've held to be true in the past that might not be true right now. And it might not help my recovery. So I need to get the negative stuff out of the brain box. So I look forward to that with you. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. We don't want to go too long because we don't want people to shut us off. Right. But okay. Thanks. And Remember, at Spark of Life, there's always hope. And I know maybe something that was said in the podcast today can give you a little hope. If you need some more help, check out sparkoflife.org, sparkoflife.org. Rusty mentioned the online course. He's one of our coaches. When you get purchase an online course, it's at your pace. It's the privacy of your own home. And with that course, you get 3 30-minute coaching sessions with the Spark of Life certified grief recovery coach. Rusty and Nancy are 2 of our coaches. Other people are coaches. And check out the online course and check out our retreats. Our virtual retreats are going to start up in a few months. And we just want you to know there's always hope for whatever you're going through. At Spark of Life, our heartbeat is to walk beside those who are grieving. And may you know that you can have a healthy recovery and life can be meaningful again in the midst of your hurt and your pain. At Spark of Life, there is always hope.